Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. The limits of presidential power. That is what is on the docket for the Supreme Court. The decision to say to Donald Trump that he had exceeded presidential authority when it came to tariffs came down in a unanimous ruling from members of a court who were basically nominated by conservative Republicans. And so we have a situation now which is a fascinating constitutional dilemma. Who has the power to do the things that Donald Trump is doing? And in the end, the decision will be made by the United States Supreme Court. I have said this before, but I will say it once again. When it gets to the Supreme Court, sooner rather than later, two justices, Amy Coney Barrett and Chief Justice John Roberts, will hold the fate of presidential power in their hands. I have argued repeatedly on this podcast and in my public talks that a president does not have the power to unilaterally impose tariffs. I believe that to be true with every fiber of my being. All you have to do is go back to 1930 with Smoot-Hawley and understand that although these tariffs were to wreak havoc during the Depression, as soon as Franklin Roosevelt became president, Congress rescinded them. It is important to note that that is only one question on the Supreme Court docket. We were told yesterday by Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State of the United States, that now they're going after Chinese students, that is, students from China who are studying in this country, and their right to be here, to study, is now being reviewed. And indeed, there is a fear abroad in the land among foreign students in general. They want to know what is their status. And of course, as the weather worsens in the south and east of this country, the question of emergency services, of FEMA, of NOAA, of all of those institutions which have been so vital whenever we have a crisis of weather. These issues all boil down to a single question. What is the power of the President of the United States? Elon Musk is now departing. He announced he's going back to his businesses. But did he have the power to do what he did? That too will be decided ultimately by the Supreme Court. The question of presidential power is fascinating. We have talked before about the idea of a unitary president, the idea that the President of the United States is invested with power because he is the president, and that should be enough to compel, an elimination of something that has been part of American democracy, the balance of powers, co-equal branches of government, legislative, judicial, and executive. But what Donald Trump is doing is pushing the border of the question of executive power. I have argued since day one of the Trump administration that ruling by executive order, I don't think it flies. And I think that's how the court will rule. More than that, there is a more fundamental question. Why would Congress cede power to the president that clearly should be in the hands of the Congress? And of course, it has to do with the fact that the Republicans control the House and the Senate, and that they seem, up to this point, to be unwilling to challenge the authority of Donald Trump. I have opposed consistently, both here on this podcast and through the years on KGO, the idea of a unitary presidency. I do not believe that a president should have unlimited power. And I think that is where we are today. I know the focus is going to be on tariffs. I know the markets are going to respond to what's happening. And I know that in the end, the Supreme Court will rule on the authority of a president to impose tariffs. But there is a more fundamental issue here, and that is the power of the executive branch. Does a president have the power to do what Donald Trump has been doing since he took office on January 20th? I believe that there will be a response, a resounding no. And I believe that that reprimand will not just go to the White House, it will go to the Congress as well. Where is the Speaker of the House of Representatives on this question? Where is the Majority Leader of the United States Senate on these questions? Where are the Republicans? You can imagine, I believe, that if Joe Biden had tried to do what Donald Trump is now doing, why the Republicans would have been crying loudly against the actions. I wanted to reflect this morning on this because it should be the dominant story in the news. And I want to conclude with this thought. The president, the vice president, the attorney general, the solicitor general have all suggested that if the court rules something that they don't like, they may not comply. That, my friends, would be a genuine constitutional crisis. And then the question will be, what will members of Congress, Republicans, do? Will they side with a court or will they side with a president? The idea of the exercising of power is something more intoxicating than anything. And there is no doubt that on the question of the power of a president, what Donald Trump has done and what the courts will do will define the nature of presidential power for the foreseeable future. It is my hope that the court will rein in Donald Trump and that we will have a semblance of responsibility on the part of the administration, that they will not challenge that court decision. But we'll have to wait and see. The arrogance of power is something that we are witnessing every single day. Whether it has to do with tariffs, it has to do with Harvard, it has to do with slashing vital federal agencies like FEMA and NOAA, whether it has to do with the power of health and human services when it comes to vaccines. All of these questions will ultimately be resolved by the United States Supreme Court. And believe me, with the end of the term upon us, because June marks the end of this court's term, many decisions may be rendered in the near future. And I, for one, can't wait to see what the court will do, how Trump will respond, and how Republicans in Congress will react. All of these questions and more, we'll be talking about them right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World. I am your host, John Rothman. Make sure to follow along. Let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. And of course, you can interact with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, and of course, many of you email me, and I welcome your input. Well, that's it for now. I want to say a special thank you to Gogo Zoger, who puts this podcast up every single day. Without her, well, we would be less assertive in terms of your hearing this voice. I am John Rothman. Stay tuned. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you then.